let's speak to some of the elephants in the room tonight about the candidates and about the important issues that so many of us care about.
The bottom line is there are some people that you just cannot vote for. You just cannot cast a vote for them. It's like Scott said, he couldn't vote for the person in his riding. And there are some people that you can vote for, and you are going to have all the information in front of you based on the things that you believe are important to make those decisions.
You have to remember that political parties are not in and of themselves the end. Political parties are just a vehicle that we utilize in the political process to get to where we want to go.
Hi, this is Doug Sharp, host of the National Leadership Briefing, and this is the Midweek Touchpoint. Well, I'm excited this week to share something very special with you, and that is a conversation I recently had with two of my very dear friends, Faytene Grasecci and Scott Hayward. Now, of course, whenever Faytene and Scott and I get together, we have a tendency to talk politics. It was no different this time. We were talking about the Conservative Party of Canada leadership election race, and all of our organizations have been working hard to bring people into the conversation so that we can combine our voices and speak with maximum influence. We want to make sure that we have a person who is willing to represent our views and values, or better yet, represents our views and values as the leader of that party, someone who could become the next prime minister of our nation. So it is my pleasure today to share this recording with you of this conversation with Faytene and Scott. Enjoy. And of course, until next time, please know we're going to continue to pray for you, for your family, and for this great nation of Canada. On with the recording. Bye for now.
All right, well, look at that. We are live on Sunday night to talk about the Conservative leadership race and important things that we think we should all be considering as we look towards how we are going to mark our ballot. And big news. The ballots have actually been mailed out early. We were expecting the ballots to be mailed out the end of July, early August, but the party announced, I believe it was just on Friday, that ballots are already in the mail. And I've already been getting a ton of messages from several of you out there saying, got my ballot, Faytene? Is the voter's guide out yet? Let's talk about how we are going to strategically vote for the betterment of our nation and future generations. So tonight, this is going to be so much fun. This is a live conversation that we're doing on our YouTube channel and on my personal Facebook page. And in a second here, I'm going to call up two very highly respected individuals in my mind and heart. Doug Sharp from the National Leadership Briefing is going to be joining me to chop it up, and also Scott Hayward from Right Now, one of the leading political pro-life organizations in Canada. And so, but before we get there, we would love to have some interaction with those of you that are joining in live tonight. So let us know who you are. Let us know where you're from. Scott, Doug, and I are going to be chopping it up. We've got a few things we want to dive into here right off of the top, but we also want to give some opportunity for you to make comments, to ask questions. Let's speak to some of the elephants in the room tonight about the candidates and about the important issues that so many of us care about. So we're going to be talking about parental rights. We're going to be talking about the life issue. I always love to talk about fiscal stewardship, prudence on that level. And there's a lot that we're going to be mixing into this conversation here. So let us know where you're from. Hi, Margaret. I see Margaret there. And she said, am I missing anything? I don't hear anything. Is the audio okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay, got voice and video. Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay, well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up Doug and Scott right now. So let's welcome them on up. Okay, Doug Sharp, Scott Hayward. Good to see you guys. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, Faytene. Thanks for having us on.
Feeling strong. Thank you.
Amazing. Now, Doug, where are you live streaming in from tonight? Let our viewers know.
We're actually right here at the Canada Family Action offices in Penticton, British Columbia.
Right on. And I'm in Atlantic Canada, so we're literally spanning 4 time zones here. And Scott, you are where?
I am in Stony Creek, which is just east of Hamilton, going out in the Niagara Peninsula. That's where my wife and I live, and just in my home office here.
Such a beautiful part of the nation. And we've got people coming in from Battleford, Saskatchewan. And we've got someone here coming in from Amber, Ontario. We've got Louis from Quebec. Good to have you on tonight, Louis. And hope you guys will stick with us the whole time. and it's going to be an eye-opening conversation. Okay, so we are talking about the current Conservative Party of Canada federally, the current leadership race that is underway. Now, this is a big deal. The reason it's a big deal is because whoever wins this leadership race very well could be the future Prime Minister of Canada. Politics historically in our nation tends to swing back and forth from Liberal to Conservative. We've now been Liberal since 2015 for 3 terms. There's a very good chance, especially if you're looking at the polls federally, that this next election could swing back to the Conservatives. So whoever wins this leadership race very well could be the next Prime Minister. And I know, Doug, you've alluded to that a lot. So first thing I want to talk about is, what's the most important thing for people to be considering? Many of our viewers will have gotten their membership, they're getting their ballots in the mail, and they're getting ready to get that ballot back for the September 6th deadline so it can be counted. Doug, you are a civic engagement trainer. What are you telling your people is the most important thing to watch for in this current leadership race when they're considering who they're going to mark on their ballots?
Well, thank you, Vaitine, and thank you for putting this call together here tonight. I know that so much work has been done by your organization to bring people together to focus on this as a priority. They know it's important. I'm going to ask you a question, but I gotta say this first: is I've watched so many of your people, your mobilizers, that have worked so much beyond themselves, and they've really stretched. And it's been just a wonderful thing to see people take responsibility really for the nation the way that they have. And kudos to you and your leadership and all of those on your teams across the nation who came forward and really worked the recruitment stage of this program. Thousands and thousands of people have been mobilized into this process to answer that very question that you just asked, is what's important to you? And that's what we've been doing as well here. We've been following along as well and working with you because we're excited with the idea that we can make a difference, that we can actually bring our priorities to bear on this contest. And when you ask what's important to the people that I serve and that we serve, they're probably not so different than yours. We have people that focus very sincerely on, they're looking for the candidate that is going to preserve and protect things like parental authority, right of belief, freedom of religion, protection for the vulnerable, and of course, not just talking about it, but actually doing something about the burden of debt that's been placed on the backs of our children and future generations. So these are the things that our folks are looking for in the candidates that have come forward. And that's what we consider to be very, very high priorities in deciding how it is that they're going to cast their votes as they've received them in the mail.
And now I know in previous election races or leadership races, you've actually done interviews of all the candidates and you've really dove into those 4-pillar questions. Have you been able to do that? And if not, for this leadership race, how do you encourage people to really get through the weeds of answering the question of where the leaders stand on the issues that they care about?
Right. Yeah. So for this leadership election race, we did things a little bit differently. We wanted to bring the candidates together the first time to hear from them what they wanted to tell us about their campaigns. So we brought on the other leaders, but this time what we're doing is we're using this, what we're calling the equipping phase of this process, for the people that we serve to get in touch with the individual candidates and actually inform them that, look, we're looking for specific things. We've actually had our citizens, the people that we serve, bring forward policy ideas and different suggestions, things like the Parental Authority Protection Act. We discussed that with the last candidates, but now we wanted our people that we're serving to bring forward that and go, look, Mr. Candidate, I've got this ballot in my hand and I'm going to be casting a vote one way or the other. And I notice on your platform, you're not talking about parents' right to raise their kids the way they want. What is it you can tell me that would cause me to put your name number 1 on my ballot? And so we've got a letter that just went out last week to everyone we're serving it's a template letter that they can send into the campaigns real quick because the ballots are out there now. But we're just saying, look, make sure all the candidates know that this is an important thing for you. It's a priority and that they better speak up or they're not going to get the vote. Now, I should throw something in there. I use the Parental Authority Protection Act as one of the things that we had put forward. we noticed that one of the candidates has already come up with a proposed piece of legislation that addresses just that. And we're excited to see that in that one candidate. Dr. Leslyn Lewis has said that she supports this idea of enshrining in legislation the authority of parents and where that stands in relationship to government. So that's a little bit different strategy this time, but we're hoping it's as effective as it was before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can say, absolutely, this is a concern for people, both because of the vaccine issue. Several parents expressed to us that they felt deeply uncomfortable with the sense of coercion that they were feeling from the school systems at times over that issue. And then the other thing is the sex education issue, right? So parental rights is something that I know a lot of people across this nation deeply, deeply care about. Now, Scott, your group exclusively focuses on the life issue, and you break it down candidate by candidate. Can you just talk to our viewers right now about why the life issue is the one that you decided to hang your hat on, why that's the one issue that you're driving towards? And then secondly, the research that you've done for pro-life voters and where they can find it.
Sure. And I'd just like to firstly echo what Doug had to say, 18, in that, we worked with a lot of people who volunteer for your organization, specifically in this leadership race. And we've worked with them previously, whether it be in party policy conventions, other leadership races, as well as volunteers from your organization as well, Doug. So kudos to both of your organizations for getting out there and selling memberships and encouraging people to sell memberships to their friends and family who share their views and values in their own network. Because if people want to see the Conservative Party of Canada, or any political party for that matter, more reflect and better reflect the views and values that they hold, the one and only thing you can really do, and if you have enough people that do it, you will be successful in accomplishing this task, is by getting involved in that political party so that you can influence the way in which that political party will represent your views and values. So for me, my number one issue when I'm at the ballot box, whether it's in a general election, by-election, leadership race, nomination race, whatever, is the life issue. So I like to say that, myself, my colleague Alyssa, and the 30,000 supporters that we have in our organization right across Canada, we're not one issue voters, we're not single issue voters, but we're number one issue voters. So as soon as that issue is addressed for us in a satisfactory manner, then we can go through other issues, and different people in organizations will have different priorities. The reason why that's the number one issue for us and for all the people in our database is because the life issue is fundamental. It is fundamental to everything else. The right to life, the right to actually to be alive, is necessary in order to have any other rights, whether it be democratic rights, the rights of mobility, medical rights, all these issues that have come up in the past, year or two. Those all don't matter if you're not alive. You can't have those rights if you don't have the right to life. So the right to life is the most fundamental right in this country. In Canada, unfortunately, we have close to 300 abortions that happen every day since this live stream started. On average, there's already been a couple of abortions that have occurred in this country. So we have a very high abortion rate in Canada compared to a lot of other Western countries. Canada is one of only 2 countries in the world where there is no legislation to regulate abortion whatsoever, no statute. The only other country where that's the case is North Korea, which of course is a basket case. It seems like every day Canada gets closer and closer to that anyway. So that is why, for my colleague Alyssa, for myself, and for the people in our organization, all our volunteers, our donors, our supporters, that is why that is our number one issue. And it applies to the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. And so the information that we're able to provide our supporters, the information that we're able to provide people watching this live stream, whether they're watching it live or they're watching it later, is we go and we have an opportunity. We give an opportunity to every single candidate who is running in the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race to answer some questions that we have for them, specifically regarding the life issues of abortion and assisted suicide. So this is something we've been doing since our organization was founded in 2016. This is the third leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada in the last 5 years. This is actually the first time, Doug and 18, that every single one of the candidates in the leadership race actually answered our interview. So it's all available on our website, www.startsrightnow.ca. You go to the top, taskbar there, and you'll be able to see it there. And there's that information. And so we provide a recommended ranked ballot. So we're not telling people, you have to fill it out, that you should fill it out. But we go through the candidates and we look at 3 criteria. Number one, we look at, what are their views and values? What do they plan on doing in order to reduce the abortion and assisted suicide rates in Canada? That's where most of the weights of the points that we allocate for recommended ranked ballot go to. We also look at their voting history. So if they've been a member of parliament or a member of provincial parliament or a member of the Legislative Assembly, or Jean Charest's case, a member of the National Assembly in Quebec, we look at your voting record on abortion and assisted suicide. We allocate some points based on that as well. And finally, we look at winnability. Are you a current member of parliament? Do you have experience in cabinet? Can you speak both official languages fluently? How much support do you have amongst caucus? How many Facebook and Twitter followers do you have, so you can actually get your message out there, especially if legacy media isn't going to do that for you, which is probably not the case for most of these people. So anyways, we've all packaged that together. We put some numbers to it. We tried to be as objective as possible, take as much of the subjectivity out as we can, and we provide a recommended ranked ballot. So I hope that answers your questions, Fatine. But yeah, this is not our first rodeo, and we're more than happy to provide the information out there for other folks where this is maybe their number one issue, if not their number one issue, pretty darn close, near to the top for them.
Right. And, a lot of times you'll hear people critique pro-life voters and say, well, you can't just be focused on that one issue. I like how you put that, Scott, where you said it's not that pro-life voters are one issue voters. They just have one issue that they care about. That's their non-negotiable. But I do want to say this kind of in defense of that strategy. Through our advocacy work for My Canada, we've been meeting with members of parliament and senators. I think our first little stint there to Ottawa was in 2004. And since 2004, we've had over 1,500 sit-down meetings with members of parliament and senators. We met with Stephen Harper a few times. I actually met with Justin Trudeau when he was first elected member of parliament. And one of the things that we've noticed is that usually, particularly in this political context currently, usually if a member of parliament is pro-life, and if they're willing to say they're pro-life, and if they're willing to say that they're not just personally pro-life, but they're willing to actually vote pro-life, if that member of parliament in the current context, particularly with the legacy media, is a very courageous person. And so what I've often found, and what we've found, is that if somebody is pro-life, they're almost always, I'll say 99.9% of the time, they are also pro on all the other issues that most of our viewers and people who follow us would care about. They're pro balance the books. They're pro faith. They're pro parental rights. They're just generally pro freedom of conscience people. And so I've actually found that the life issue tends to be a little bit of a litmus test issue about somebody's ethos politically, and how they're willing to conduct themselves when it actually comes down to a vote. So I do just want to give your organization a hat tip for that reason, because it's kind of the cheater way, actually.
We don't want to encourage cheating, but you're more than welcome to use the information.
Okay, I'll rephrase that. It's the shortcut way. It's the shortcut way to kind of live. And like I said, it's not 100% foolproof, but I definitely found that most members of parliament flesh out in that way. So I do want to actually dive into the whole question. And this might not be something that necessarily comes to people's thoughts right off the bat. But like you said, Scott, this isn't your first rodeo. Doug, this definitely is not your first rodeo. One thing that I observed in the last leadership race is that almost as important, perhaps some would say even more important than the candidate and the leader that's chosen, is the candidate's team. Mm-hmm. Now, we saw in the OLO, that's the official leader of the opposition's office, we saw that there were some pretty, there were some tough decisions that were made along the way about where the leader was going to stand, nominations, some of the things that happened along the way that Erin O'Toole himself didn't necessarily make the decisions, but the people around him did. And how the people around them conducted themselves really determined how things swung one way or another when it came to some faith, family, and freedom issues. So I've come to learn that it's actually very, very important to look carefully at who a person's campaign team is. I want to ask you guys before I kind of dive deeper into this, do you agree with that? Is this something that people should be considering when they cast their vote this time around? Doug, why don't you go first on that one?
Oh, I'd be happy to, because it was such a major thing that we had to address during the Erin O'Toole leadership with the Conservative Party of Canada. I heard the phrase, or something similar to this phrase, of "Who is this guy?" ? So many times, because those people that knew Erin O'Toole before he became the leader actually were quite surprised by many of the things that he did after he became the leader. And he was acting in a way that was quite inconsistent with his record to many that knew him. Then he became more and more consistently inconsistent. And and that was because of, again, I agree with you. I really believe it is because of the people and the advisors that he surrounded himself with. And I have to say, I know that everything rises and falls on leadership. Anybody who's been in leadership will admit, they'll say, look, it all lands on my shoulders. The responsibility lands on me. But Erin O'Toole, and again, I'm not throwing stones at the guy that, that's already gone. Just, I'm just sharing with you the feedback that we received. It was really hard to read this guy anymore, because he was getting advice that was from people that were faceless and nameless to us, like to most of us. Now, I'm really eager to hear Scott's response to this, because I know Scott is really plugged in to understanding who these teams are around the people. And Faytine, I'm so glad you're going to be commenting on this with your balloting information in the future, because I really would love to serve our people by helping them to peel back that onion, to see how important these people are, these influencers that are there. Because what we're trying to do out in front of our candidates is be an influence. But if there are people behind a curtain, we want to pull that curtain back and really understand who they are, what their motivations are, and where they want to take not only the party, but our nation, because we didn't vote for them. We voted for the person on the ballot. And I'm really excited to hear, like I say, all about the details of the teams behind these leaders now.
Yeah, I think that's an important point there, Doug. I think for a lot of people, that what they need to understand is when you have a frustration toward a leader in a leader's office, for example, whether it be a leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, or the Liberal Party, or the United Conservative Party of Alberta, that there's a whole machine there, and that's not atypical, right? Like that's something you're going to find in basically every democracy around the world, because you need a number of people to try to keep tabs on different policy files, on crafting communications, things of this nature, and that's perfectly fine. So you're going to have a rather large team. So, for example, in the office of the leader of the opposition federally in Ottawa, in the OLO, you have typically anywhere between 50 and 80 staff members, and then on the party headquarters side, you're going to have at least a few dozen staff members there. Sometimes it increases, for example, during leadership race or during a policy convention, because you're having to do more processing and stuff like that. But you have very top high level staffers for an opposition party in Ottawa, not even a party in government. You have probably about 100 to 150 key staffers, and it's not like all 100 or 150 are awful and people who are not on side with us. We've worked quite diligently, I would say, over the last few years as an organization to get more people who share our views and values plugged into being full-time staffers in Ottawa, not necessarily in the office of the leader of the opposition or party headquarters. I mean, that's rarely do you just go there to begin with, right? You usually start in an MP's office or a senator's office, maybe a minister's office, and then you kind of work your way up to that. But we have been able, even under Erin O'Toole, to get people there. Now, we have some people there. It's a small minority, or we've had people in the past there is a small minority. And so it's really up to the leader to decide who are they going to have on their staff and who are they going to listen to. So when you're looking at the candidates right now, they're running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, and for folks listening in Alberta, provincially for that party as well, it is an important consideration to take in, right? When deciding how you're going to cast your ballot. So you look at someone like Dr. Leslyn Lewis, who and I don't mean to say to sound extreme here, but I know a lot of people on a lot of the campaigns for this leadership race for all candidates, as a matter of fact. Leslyn Lewis is probably more so than anyone else. Personally, I don't know. I know a lot of people in that campaign. I don't really know anyone on her campaign that I wouldn't really trust, which is, I think, a really good, excellent sign. There are some good people on Pierre Poilievre's campaign. You have Ginny Roth there, who is with Crestview. She does excellent communications on our issues, on our life issues. She is his director of communications, but she's only one person, right? And at the end of the day, he makes a decision on different policies that he is either going to embrace or to reject. And there's a lot of other people on his campaign that don't embrace our pro-life policies. They don't see them as winning policies. They take the Harper line because there's a lot of people on his campaign team that were involved in Stephen Harper's governments. And as big of fans as some people might be out there of Stephen Harper's governments, because that was the most recent conservative government, there were a lot of downfalls to it. Number one, the abortion rate didn't go down at all. Number two, he made no efforts to decrease the abortion rate. Number three, he had terrible appointments to the federal judiciary, most especially the Supreme Court of Canada. It was a Harper majority Supreme Court, a Harper appointed majority Supreme Court that allowed for assisted suicide to be legalized in Canada. And so a lot of these same people that were involved in the Harper government, they're now involved in Pierre Poilievre's leadership campaign, and they are hoping to get back into government in probably the end of 2024, 2025, when the next federal election campaign will occur. And so that kind of is red flags to me. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily aggressive against pro-lifers, unlike how some people in Aaron O'Toole's OLO were. But they don't value our values. They don't share our values. They don't share our number one voting concerns. And then some of the other candidates out there, I mean, do we want to consider Patrick Brown to be a candidate or not? Like, I don't think he's going to be able to be allowed back into the race. But there were some people, again, not all, but there were some people on his campaign that are aggressive, very, very aggressive against us. And then on the other campaigns, there's some people on Roman's campaign that are good toward us. Some people on Roman's campaign that, are kind of indifferent to us. There are people that are aggressive against us on Charest's campaign and Aitchison's campaign, but there are also people who are warm to us on that campaign too. So it's really who they're going to listen to. And I think at the end of the day, yes, it's important how you surround yourself and who you surround yourself with. That says a lot about the candidate themselves, but it does come down to where the candidate wants to go. So, if Pierre Poilievre has a couple good people like Ginny Roth on his campaign, is Ginny Roth winning out the day when it comes to these issues on abortion or assisted suicide, or, young children, minors transitioning, or parental rights and stuff like that? I would argue probably not. And so that is something that people who are members of the party, who are voting and receiving their ballots, or are watching this, they really need to take that into consideration. So I think that's an excellent point that you bring up, Faytine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say this, as we're in this discussion right now, I think it is so important for us just to be honest, right? Like, the stakes are so high for our nation. We are at such a pivotal moment, and politics is not a game. It's not a sport. We're literally making decisions that are going to influence our lives, our grandma's life, and all those around us that we love. So it is really important for us to be honest. So this conversation right now is in no way to throw anybody under the bus, but it's just to give a pragmatic analysis. And one thing that I noticed as well is that around Pierre is, say, for example, Jenny Byrne, Corey Teneycke, as I understand it, since the provincial Ontario election has now commenced, he's shifted a lot of focus into backing Pierre, as I understand it. Anthony Cook, these are the ones that orchestrated the plan to really remove Andrew Scheer from office because they didn't appreciate his social conservative values. And is that a correct read on this? This isn't a commentary on whether or not these are nice people or are respectable professionals. They're all wonderful people, but their values don't necessarily align with the people that would be watching this live stream when it comes to faith, family, and freedom. Is that a fair analysis, Scott, from what you know about these teams?
Well, I've had some good conversations with Anthony, especially toward the end of Aaron O'Toole's leadership, which is interesting because Anthony supported him in the last leadership race. I mean, there was a lot of people, I think, toward the end of Aaron O'Toole's leadership that had supported him that were kind of hopping off that train, so to speak. I wouldn't necessarily say that, and I've never had a conversation with Jenny Byrne. I've never had a conversation with Corey Tonight. From the outside looking in, and from what people tell me, like, I wouldn't say for those two that they necessarily, I can't say with certitude that they're aggressively pro-abortion. They're aggressively pro-assisted suicide. I think they're aggressively disinterested in those topics. All three of them, I would say, for the people that you listed out, they have other issues, they have other priorities, and that's not necessarily a bad thing innately per se, but it means that you have to have people who are interested in these issues that are on your team, and when these issues come up, that what they have to say actually gets out there, and that some policies that they are proposing are part of your program. And you take a candidate like Pierre Poilievre, there really isn't much of a program out there. I think that's on purpose, right? He's just railing against inflation, doesn't really have a solution for it, mind you, and we can get into that a little bit later. But when it comes to the topics of specifically about abortion, I mean, how many times in the past 2 months has this come up because of what's happening south of the border regarding the Supreme Court decision on Dobbs, which overruled the Roe v. Wade decision from 1973. If the Pierre Poilievre team, and he himself especially, think that, in the next election campaign, whether it be in 2024 or 2025, they think they can do a 36-day election campaign talking just about inflation or whatever teeny tiny small box of issues they want to talk about, they got to give their head a shake, because the Liberal Party of Canada and a lot of people in legacy media aren't going to let them get away without talking about, what would be considered, quote unquote, controversial issues like abortion, like, would you allow, minors to medically transition from one sex to another, even on assisted suicide, parental rights, things of this nature, things that Pierre Poilievre and especially a lot of people around him on his team do not want to talk about. But I'm sorry, it's not 2011 anymore. These issues are being talked about. They are being talked about on social media, and other countries are having, adult discussions about these issues. You go across the pond and you look in the United Kingdom, for example. In the United Kingdom, it is illegal for anyone under the age of 18 to medically transition themselves from one sex to another. And there's very, very good reasons for that. And no one really bats an eye. You look at every other country besides North Korea in the world, and they have some sort of statute that, regulates abortion. Sweden, France, Spain, Belgium. These are countries that are seen to be, kind of socialist, left wing. Well, maybe not so much Spain. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But definitely France, Sweden, and Belgium. They all have Germany. Even they all have legislation. They have statute regulating abortion. For example, in Germany, if a woman wants to seek an abortion, the very first thing that they're offered is counseling, because oftentimes, and Leslyn Lewis talks about this, a lot of women in the Western world are coerced into having an abortion. These are issues that are never talked about in Canada. These are issues that can be talked about, and not to sound super crass, they can be talked about in a way that's a politically winning way, because the Liberal Party of Canada under Justin Trudeau takes a very, very extreme stance on abortion. Yeah, most Canadians would identify in most polls as pro-choice, but with tons of exceptions. Very few Canadians in this country think that abortion should be legal all the way for the 9 months of pregnancy up to birth. Most would believe in restricting abortion legally through the criminal code when it comes to sex-selective abortion, when it comes to late-term abortion, when it comes to pain capability abortion, oftentimes with the very teeny tiny exceptions for, sexual assault or, the life of the mother. There's a huge winning Venn diagram of common ground for any conservative leader, whether it be Pierre Poilievre or Jean Charest or Leslyn Lewis or Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole, or Stephen Harper to take, but they're not taking it, most especially the people around Pierre Poilievre who come from the Harper area. And so I think that, at the next election, they're going to have a rude awakening. They're not going to be used to it. They think that they're going to just not talk about it and be fine with it. And maybe they might win enough seats to form government, or at least contest to form government, but they're going to leave way more seats and way more votes on the table by not talking about it in a very, I would be so bold to say, in a very Leslyn Lewis-like fashion. So, and a long way to say, I've had one conversation with those three people that you mentioned, Faitine. I can't speak for Jenny. I can't speak for Corey. I don't know if they're aggressively against us like Justin Trudeau would be, but I think they're terrified of the issue. And because of that, I think it's a disservice not only for Pierre Poilievre, should he win the leadership race, but also for the Conservative Party of Canada in the next election, whenever it might be.
Yeah. And my read on this, Court, is the Conservative Party is in such a vulnerable situation right now, because if they elect another leader that is liberal light, or has a team around them that is pushing them or coercing them in that direction on the issues that are not their hill that they would love to die on. And not that anyone would love to die on a hill, but you get what I mean. And so if we elect another liberal light conservative leader, I think it's a pretty easy read that going into the next general election, there is a vulnerability that there will be a strong leak on the right. We know in the last federal election, the data crunched out that the Conservatives lost probably somewhere between 20 to 25 seats to the PPC split. Do you guys see that as a vulnerability if we have a leader that's liberal light with a team around him that is like red Tory to the core?
Well, I'd like to answer that for sure, because, and I'd like to say something directly to everyone who's listening to this message here today or on the call, and just to assure them of one thing. If you're sitting there at home and you have in your heart a sincere desire to see babies in the womb protected with some kind of legislative framework in our nation, that you believe that this is a very valuable and worthwhile thing to pursue in our political and governmental spheres, is to get some kind of legislation in place. I want you to know that you are one of millions and millions of Canadians out there just like you. Don't let anybody tell you that this is a fringe minority issue. I'm so glad, Scott, that you're mentioning that this is part of a strategy to form government, to bring coalitions of people with different ideas together. That's how Conservatives win governments, is by bringing people together that have varied ideas, but are willing to work together on certain things. But this whole idea of, here is your seat at the table, now sit down and shut up and don't talk about abortion, that's never been palatable to any person who believes that children in the womb must be protected. Like, they've just never been something they've been willing to compromise on. So this is what that's why I've always been encouraging the leadership of any Conservative Party over the last 20 years to really open your eyes at the opportunity that you have here. The opportunity that you have here, like Scott said, to have the discussion that everyone is having all around the world. This is a very important issue. It's being talked about. The people are using the science. I mean, our science on this issue has advanced so greatly over the last 20 years that we can actually rely on very good scientific data to understand where the baby is at in the womb. I mean, if you need to use the science, then we've got a very good case to make there as well. But when you've got, again, this resistance to even discuss it, you are going to drive people like you and me. Well, I got to say, maybe not me, because I'm staying in this. I'm staying in this to fight, because I'm not going to miss the win. I really believe that the tide is turning, and I believe that within the Conservative Party of Canada, they will come to understand this is an issue that needs to be addressed. But if they don't address it in the short term, they will bleed support. Some people throw up their hands in the air and they say, you know what, I just can't vote for you. We saw it at the last election. We saw many people who are even involved on Conservative Party of Canada Electoral District Association boards not even be able to vote for their own members of parliament, their Conservative members of parliament, and they voted PPC because it just became unpalatable for them to continue to support them with their vote when they won't open the door and have these conversations about the preborn children. And so thank you for bringing that up, Fatine. I don't like to normally talk with people, especially if they're brand new to engaging in political processes. I don't like to talk about strategy typically, but I'm glad you brought this up about the PPC, because not only do I think it's important for even new people to understand why we're inside the Conservative Party fighting for our place to be there, fighting to have that place. But I think it's important to understand for the leadership of the Conservative Party that if you don't get this right and start acting in a way that acknowledges this large coalition of voters, then you are going to lose support, and it will be a long, long day, long time from now before you form government again.
Faitine,
Yeah,
can I
I think
just
you're
jump in there real quick? I just want to add on something that Doug said, and it's a really, really important point, and that's not giving up the fight within the Conservative Party of Canada. At the end of the day, for people who share our views and values, political parties are just vehicles. They're there for us to try and take the wheel if we can, which is something we've been working toward all of our organizations for the past few years, to drive it to the direction that we need it to go, to not only see our policies be enacted, but it's also politically a good place for the party to go, because it's going to result in more seats, more votes, and likely to form government. And so, as an example, what you bring up, Fatine, about the potentiality of having a liberal light leader driving people away from the party, whether it be not voting or voting for another political party, is a very, very real threat. So, I don't know if I would describe someone like Pierre Poilievre as liberal light. I would probably describe him as conservative light. He's mostly conservative on economic issues, and then every other issue, he's silent, right? Or his votes has changed. He used to vote pro-life all the time. Pierre Poilievre used to go to National Campus Life Network events. This is the umbrella organization for all the activist campus groups across Canada. He used to go to their events as a young man, I believe, when he was going to Carleton, and now he's voting against sex-selective abortion bans. He's voting in favor of sex-selective abortion. I would much rather have a candidate who's always been pro-abortion, because then you know where they are, and at least they've been logically consistent, and you can say that they've always had a consistent voting record and ethics and ethos and whatever you want to say. Pierre Poilievre doesn't have that. It's interesting to me, as well, as when you have someone like Dr. Jordan Peterson go on and on about how great Pierre Poilievre is. Meanwhile, Bill C-16 a few years ago, which amended the Federal Human Rights Code to basically say, like, if someone wants to identify this way, you have to, you can't, misgender them. You have to enter into their version of reality and use their whatever preferred pronouns there are. That's the bill that made Dr. Peterson famous around the world. That's the one where he got to go on to BBC, and he was on different networks in the United States. That's the one that really, really launched him. And what did Pierre Poilievre do when that vote came to the House of Commons? You can literally see it on Parleview, which is the camera that's in the House of Commons. As the vote was happening, and at the time Pierre Poilievre was sitting on the front bench, he was sitting in between Mark Stroll and Peter Van Loan. Both Mark Stroll and Peter Van Loan got off their butts and voted against that legislation. What did Pierre Poilievre do? He sat down. He did not vote against the legislation, had his shoulders hunched, literally trying to hide from the cameras. That is the kind of leader that Dr. Peterson likes, and I don't think that Dr. Peterson is aware of that, because I think if he were, he wouldn't be so enamored by him. And so the point being is that it's really important to know kind of where these different people are at, where these different candidates are at. As an example, so I would say that Pierre Poilievre is conservative light. I don't know if he'd be liberal light. I think there is a potentiality that, in a few years from now, if he were to win the leadership race, that when these questions come up in the media and he's seen as running away, just as like he did on that C-16 vote, that could push some people who would otherwise vote conservative to either not vote conservative or vote PPC. I voted PPC in the last federal election last September, almost a year ago, in my riding, because we didn't have a pro-life conservative candidate. So I'm not going to vote for someone who's pro-abortion. I would never vote for someone who's pro-abortion, especially if there's a different candidate who isn't pro-abortion that I can vote for, and that was my PPC candidate. But at the same time, I maintained, and I still maintain, my membership in the Conservative Party of Canada. I am involved in this leadership race. I was involved in the party policy convention, because while I didn't vote for the party, because I didn't really have an opportunity to vote for the party realistically because the candidate was pro-abortion, I'm going to still be involved in the party to steer to be more pro-life. Because like you said at the very beginning, Faitine, of this live stream, there have only been two political parties in the history of this country that formed government, being the Liberals and the Conservatives. And those are the parties, both of them, mind you, where we need to do most of our work.
Okay. Well, next time we'll ask you to tell us what you really think, Scott.
Yeah.
You wanted to be honest. You said it's important to
That
be
was a lot.
honest,
That
and we
was a
need
lot.
it to be true.
I love the inside voice. It's, people need to know. They need to know that, and all this information, you can take it or leave it. This is, Scott's opinion based on what he's observed and experienced. And I put a lot of stock in what you've observed and experienced, Scott. So, and you as well, Doug. So thank you so much for being so honest. It's awesome. Now, I want to drive right into one of the elephants in the room here with this. Again, for those that are just logging on the live stream here, we're talking about the current Conservative leadership race. People are receiving their ballots in the mail already. And so that means some people might be popping their ballots back in the mail as early as tomorrow morning, having it already been marked. And so people are asking us, how do I vote? Do you have any tips, any ideas based on the things that I care about? Now, one of the things that I will hear people say often is, I really love Leslyn. I love what she stands for. I love that she's willing to put forward a parental charter of rights. I love that she's that she's pro-life, and she's got a policy of no hidden agenda for pro-life policies. And obviously she is fiscally conservative. She's pro-resource. She's got an environmental degree. She can profoundly relate to the ethnic community because she immigrated to Canada herself. So there's a lot that she has going for. She's brilliant, not to say the least. And so a lot of people will say, I really like her, but I don't know that she's the most winnable candidate. And of course, a lot of people are leaning towards Pierre or Charest because of the Quebec factor. And so our team pulled up some easy data, and we looked at, okay, what are the ridings? How many ridings are there in Quebec versus how many ridings are there in the urban centers? Because usually when people say Charest or Pierre are more winnable, they're referring to the ability to win the vote in Quebec. Well, Quebec has 78 ridings. Our team just did the math on the urban centers. So I'm talking about all the urban centers, not including Montreal or Quebec City. So I'm talking about the GTA, the GVRD. I'm talking about Edmonton, Calgary, Regina, Winnipeg, St. John, Halifax, basically the urban centers, less Montreal and Quebec City. And a low number crunch on that is 124 ridings. And so is this now becoming a myth that in order to be the most winnable candidate, you have to be the one that can win Quebec? Or has it now shifted? Has the power center of our nation now shifted more to the urban centers and to the various ethnic communities that are represented in those urban centers? And is that a possible game changer on this winnability question? Who'd like to go first?
Well, I will, and then Scott will go in there and actually give the actual stats on it. I'll give you the heart on this because the fact of the matter is that everybody who is going to be, or that is a part of this process, who is going to receive a ballot in the mail, you're the one that's got to make the decision, and you've got to make an informed choice based on what you believe to be the priorities. Now, where you live is obviously important, but the fact that you're engaging in the process is even more important than that. And so, and that you're encouraging others to engage in it as well, many of you. So I wanted to say this because there is a strategic, there's a calculus to how, winnability calculus, or however anybody else is going to be looking at this. And I'm so glad that we're going to be able to share that information with you through Faitine and Scott's organization. But the bottom line is there are some people that you just cannot vote for. You just cannot cast a vote for them. It's like Scott said, he couldn't vote for the person in his riding. And there are some people that you can vote for, and you are going to have all the information in front of you based on the things that you believe are important to make those decisions. Now, I really believe personally that where you are, once you get used to voting, if you've been around for a little while and you start building up a little bit of leather and you start engaging in some of the other processes, and you want to work strategically and more strategically with organizations like mine and Scott's and Faytine's and all that. I would welcome that. We've got to have these conversations, and I hope we have that right now when Scott answers this question. But for the time being, make sure that we're clear is that it is also, as politically calculated as it is, it's very important that you're clear, that you're aligned with God's views and values on these issues, and that you can vote for somebody that you feel is also either aligned with them or willing to represent your views and values in government. If the person is not, if you can't say they are to those questions, then I just have to say, you got to ask yourself, how can I vote for them? How can I support them, no matter whether their winnability factor is high or not? So now I turn it over to Scott. How about that? There you go, Scott.
Sure. Well, as the Catholic on the panel, I'll use good old fashioned guilt, because you when you cast your ballot, whether it be for a nomination race or for a leadership race or a general election, whatever it might be, you have to sleep at night. And that's getting kind of what Doug is like. It has to be aligned with your values. And to be now a little more crass, I hear from a lot of people in this leadership race, well, Pierre can beat Trudeau. Pierre can beat Trudeau. Great. So Pierre beats Trudeau. Then what? Is the abortion rate going down? Is the assisted suicide rate going down? Are we going to have protections for parents? Are we going to have protections for children to not be basically targeted in certain schools that we're starting to see in Canada to sexually transition? Like, is any of that going to change under Pierre Poilievre versus Justin Trudeau? And the answer should be, if you actually look at the data and look at the information available to you in a very objective way, a big, fat, emphatic no. So who cares if Pierre Poilievre can win more seats than Leslyn Lewis if you're just replacing Justin Trudeau with Justin Trudeau Jr. on all those top issues for you? When it comes to the economic issues, there are basically no differences between Pierre Poilievre and Leslyn Lewis. Frankly, there's no differences between Pierre Poilievre and any other candidates. And I'm just going to go on this quick little tangent here, because my background, I'm a chartered professional accountant. I went to business school. That is my degree in university. And part of that is I got an economics minor while getting my Bachelor of Business Administration degree. So I'm not an economist. That isn't my profession. That's not even my major. But I do have a little bit of professional education in economics. And when Pierre Poilievre is going around complaining about inflation, which is a real issue, and he could be and probably is correct in his diagnosis of what caused the issue of inflation, he has offered no solutions to inflation. The reason why he's offering no solutions to inflation is because he darn well knows there's only one realistic solution to inflation that basically no one wants to hear, and that is a hike, and probably a significant hike bordering on double digits of the inflation rate from the Bank of Canada, because for the last 15 years, we've had a 0% inflation, or pardon me, a 0% interest rate, bank overnight rate, when normally there should be anywhere between 2, 3, maybe 5%. So you're going to have to see a correction from the Bank of Canada, and thus a correction in the pricing, especially of the housing market, and eventually gasoline and food prices as well. No one wants to talk about that, because that is going to lead to, unfortunately, some foreclosures, perhaps a bit of a recession. And I find that to be very, very disingenuous to someone like Pierre Poilievre on that. So, on this issue of voting, who you're replacing people with, or who can beat Justin Trudeau, you have to ask yourself, who are you replacing them with? And is that going to make a significant difference? On the winnability issue for Leslyn, she won the highest number of votes out of any leadership candidate in the last election. In her riding of Haldimand Norfolk, she won the highest number of votes of any federal or provincial representative of that riding in the history of that riding. When she ran as a candidate with 28 days left or whatever it was to replace a candidate that was mired in scandal in the 2015 election campaign, she won the second highest number of votes for any conservative in that riding in the east part of Scarborough. And then finally, to get to your second point, Faytine, of 124 urban ridings versus 78, 124 non-Quebec, mind you, urban ridings versus 78 Quebec ridings. What is the name of the game, so to speak, for any political party? Well, in Canada, if you're looking at density of population, you basically have 4 different types of ridings. You have an urban riding, which are your downtown ridings. You have a suburban riding, so think of places like Mississauga or Burnaby. You have ex-urban ridings, where you have a mix of kind of rural and suburban. So a place like Milton, for example, on the western edges of the GTA. Then you have your rural ridings. And so typically for a Conservative Party, you do very well in the rural ridings. You have most of the ex-urban ridings. And then if you can do very well in suburban ridings, there is your majority government. And we saw this play out in 2011 when Stephen Harper won 166 seats in the House of Commons with only 5 seats from Quebec. And if you took those 5 seats away from him in Quebec of 161 seats, he still would have had a majority because you needed 155 at that time to have a majority in the House of Commons. So, no one talks about for the Liberal Party of Canada, like, oh, you need to win 20 more seats in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. No one says that because that's just not geographically where the power base is. Well, for the Conservative Party of Canada, geographically, their power base isn't in Quebec. They're always going to win 5 to 10 seats in Quebec, probably no matter what, just like the Liberals are always going to win probably 5 to 10 seats in Western Canada in general, when you include British Columbia and the territories in there. But the main battles are going to be in your suburban areas, in the Greater Toronto area, in the Greater Vancouver area. And we have to ask ourselves, for the leadership candidates that are running to lead the Conservative Party of Canada, is it going to be Pierre Poilievre that can win over those votes, or is it going to be the immigrant Black female lawyer from downtown Toronto that could win those votes? Hopefully, the premise of the question can answer that question pretty easily for most people.
And what a game changer with Patrick Brown being removed from the race. I know he's contesting that right now, but we know that he brought a lot of people into the vote from that exact demographic. And so it's going to be, that could possibly be a game changer, truth be told. So let's now, before we begin to wrap up, maybe give some opportunity for people to ask questions. And so I know that this can be a very intimidating conversation for people that are watching, and these guys are so brilliant in their understanding of these things. But if you have a question, now is the time to put it in the chat, to ask these guys. There is no question that is a stupid question. Every question is somebody else is thinking about it as well. So you might as well put it in there and be the smart one to ask it. And we would love to go back and forth with you in real time if you do have any questions about anything that's been shared here. But one of the most common things also that we are hearing from people is the question about the ranked ballot strategy. People are asking, do I fill out my whole ballot? And if I don't fill out my whole ballot and I just put the one person that are 2 people that I can truly say that these people represent my views and values, what would be the reason? And maybe Doug, I'll let you answer this one first. What would be the reason for only putting those that represent your views and values versus filling up your whole ballot? Why would you do one or the other?
Well, that's an excellent question because the ranked ballot has been around for an awful long time, and we have the same question every time. So it's important for people to understand if you get advice that you just should put one, for example, like just put one. The person you want to win is number one. Then there is a part of me that wants to encourage you to reconsider that, because you're actually making a statement that every single other person on the ballot then they're all equal. Now, you could also maybe they are all equal. And that's why we feel it's so important for the things like the voting guides that you do, Faytine and Scott. When you put out your voting guides, I want people to see the differences in the candidates. But if you're just going to vote one and then you leave the rest of the ballot clear, then you're basically saying that it doesn't matter who wins if it's not your choice. And I'm glad that you mentioned Patrick Brown, because to anybody out there who is working actively on the Patrick Brown campaign that hears it got rigged and he got kicked out, whatever it is that you're hearing, if you throw your hands in the air and don't cast your ballots or don't look for another person to vote for, then you're just wasting your influence. I want to win your support for our views and values. I want you to stay in the race. I want you to stick around. Just because your candidate didn't make it in, I want you to to look at all the candidates and decide what is the next best choice behind because they're not all the same. Believe me, there are varying degrees of not great that all of these candidates are. And you're going to see that when you see Faytine's voter's guide and you're going to see Scott's voter's guide. You're going to see the information that you need to make that decision as to which one is the next best thing to my number one pick. So, so that's my encouragement to people, is to not leave it blank. But again, if you're getting other advice and that's the decision you go with, I'm just glad you're here. I'm glad you're engaged in the process and that we're able to have this conversation and that you're ongoingly making a commitment to effect change within this party.
Yeah, those are all good points, Doug. And I think Doug and Fatine is just, I don't want to call, non-pro-life candidates evil, but once you kind of fill out your ballots for the pro-life candidate, well, from our perspective, right now, once you fill out your ballot for the pro-life candidates, and in this race, there's only one pro-life candidate, and that's Dr. Leslyn Lewis, then it's choosing between the lesser of evils. And so that's why we do our interview, to provide you the information, to provide an explanation of why we recommended the ranking that we did. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. It's a recommendation. I've been hearing from a lot of people that they intend to put Dr. Leslyn Lewis as number one. A few of those people, I hear a lot of Roman Baber number two. And then it seems to drop off for a lot of people, at least with amongst our supporters. Some people are putting Pierre number two. Some people put Pierre number three. Not a whole lot there for the other candidates, which is very very reasonable from my perspective, because they're not really offering a whole lot. In previous leadership races, I think for those, there was more on offer from candidates who weren't explicitly pro-life. And so there were greater degrees of variation between the non-pro-life candidates. You had some candidates at the time saying, I'm going to whip my cabinet so they can't vote pro-life. That was Pierre McKay, at least at the beginning of the campaign. He changed it by the end. And then you had Aaron O'Toole, who, to his credit, I will say, all the way through his leadership race, was a stalwart against any expansion of criteria for assisted suicide. Say what you want about the guy, and believe me, from our perspective of people who share our views and values, there's a lot you can say, but he did keep that commitment all the way through. So there are varying degrees. We present those variation of degrees. That can be seen in the interviews that we did with the candidates. You can read through them, and then you can fill your ballot accordingly. But I am hearing from a lot of people this time around that they intend to only put Dr. Lewis, maybe Dr. Lewis and Roman, and then a lot of blanks after that. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We provide a recommend rank ballot all the way through in case people do want to fill it all the way out. And you just heard Doug, he encourages people to do that, which is all well and fine. So different people will do different things. But I tend to want to fill my ballot more than not, for the very reason that Doug mentioned, that I would like to have a bit of a say as the ballot goes down, if the candidates that I put higher up begin to drop off. With Dr. Leslyn Lewis, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think she'll always be on the ballot, but in case she's not, there should be some consideration, I think, for people who are watching about how they would fill in their ballot after Dr. Leslyn Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the Right Now ranked ballot, I know it's been up there on your website for a few weeks already. And, some people have questioned me and said, why is it that Pierre got a higher ranking than Roman Baber, when it seems like Roman Baber for the last couple of years has been super, pro-conscience anyway, and definitely on the vaccine mandate issue, and seems to be a little bit more pro-freedom when it comes to actual conscience issues, at least in terms of his track record. How was it that Pierre popped over Roman in your final analysis? Is it simply because of his pro-adoption policies and that sort of thing, Scott? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, there's a few different things to take into consideration. Number one, as strong as Roman Baber has been on vaccine mandates and on lockdowns and things of this nature, dealing with COVID, he isn't pro-life. He isn't pro-life on the issue of abortion. He isn't pro-life on the issue of assisted suicide. He's strong for free votes in caucus, which most of the candidates have been, besides Patrick Brown from his experience as leader of the opposition in Ontario. And Pierre Poilievre has this weird policy where he says, yeah, there'll be free votes, but I'll ensure this type of legislation, being pro-life legislation, never passes. So what happens if the vast majority of his caucus is pro-life, and there's a pro-life and there's a conservative majority? I don't know how he circles that square, but anyway, when you would delve into the issues, Pierre Poilievre is stronger than Roman Baber on the issue of not expanding their criteria for assisted suicide, because there are people in this country that are pushing to expand criteria for assisted suicide for children, for the mentally ill, for a lot of people in down and out situations that are in no way permanent. And so there's a few more points there for him. But I should mention this, Faitine. When you just look at principles and policies, so you take away the other two criteria we look at, which are voting records and winnability. So when you just look at the pure principles and policies, Lesley Lewis comes out as number one. We gave her full marks, 100%, 70 out of 70. Roman Baber comes out as number two because he's quite strong on freedom of a caucus, freedom of his cabinet, not dissuading members of his caucus, should he be leader, from introducing and voting and advocating for pieces of pro-life legislation. Quite a bit stronger, actually, than Pierre Poilievre in his interview. So when you look at just the interview, Roman Baber did do better than Pierre Poilievre. The reason why Pierre Poilievre has a few more points than Roman Baber is because up until recently, Pierre Poilievre did have a pro-life voting record, so that's also to take consideration. Yeah, he has like a 9 out of 10, but if you have a recency bias there, then it's more like a 1 out of 10. And his winnability, let's be honest, his winnability is massive. He has a huge social media following. He has a majority of caucus behind him. He can speak both official languages quite fluently. He is already a member of parliament, and he has been in cabinet. These are all points that he has over Roman Baber. So I'm not saying that you should vote for Pierre over Roman just based on that, but these are considerations that do matter, that we want to present to people, so you can take that into consideration. So that would be the reasoning as to why Pierre is just a little bit ahead of Roman on the ranked ballot. But of course, someone like Dr. Lesley Lewis is way above both of those and everyone else, because she has a lot of the winnability, and most importantly, she 100% shares our views and values.
And it's interesting what you said about, his voting record is 9 out of 10, but his most recent vote was pro-choice. And so people have to decide how much they weight that, right? The recency issue of it. So, I've got a person here on the comment stream. I'm not going to put it up for this because of the broadcast. We're hoping to air some of these clips on the broadcast, but she's saying she is adamant that Pierre is pro-life. Would Pierre say that he's pro-life, Scott?
No, and he hasn't. He's mentioned it multiple times that he is pro-choice. He is pro-abortion. We have clips on our website in Faitine. Maybe you can share it with that person. You just can go to our Right Now Facebook page. I know, Faitine, you talked about that in a live stream a few weeks ago, where candidates were questioned about this at the Edmonton official leaders debate back in May. Where do you stand on abortion? And all the white males on the stage were tripping over themselves to declare, how pro-abortion they were. And of course, the Black female candidate was the one who declared herself to be pro-life. Complete dead silence, mind you, in the room in Edmonton, where there was over 1,000 members of the Conservative Party listening to the debate, when all the white males said that they were pro-abortion, including Pierre Poilievre. But when the Black female got up there and said that she was pro-life, she couldn't even finish her answer because the room erupted in cheers. So Pierre has said that he is pro-abortion. He said that he would not introduce pro-life legislation. He's gone beyond that and said that as Prime Minister, he would guarantee that no legislation regulating abortion, again, the only other country being where that's the case being, nutcase North Korea. And on top of that, he voted against legislation in June of 2021 that would have legally restricted sex-selective abortion, which is by far, like the easiest vote that you can cast for a pro-life piece of legislation regarding abortion. So emphatically and without a doubt, Pierre Poilievre is not pro-life. Unfortunately, I'm not saying this with great joy. I'm not saying this with a smile on my face. He is emphatically not pro-life, and he is emphatically and 100% pro-abortion under Pierre Poilievre. There would be no decrease in the 300 babies that are aborted every day in Canada, and perhaps even there would be an increase under him, because he would do absolutely nothing to curb that rate of abortion.
Okay, well, thank you, Scott. And For those that have come on recently here, I just want to also recap that we're just having a chat here tonight about the current Conservative Party of Canada leadership race, what matters most in this election. And of course, Scott, you've been majoring on the life issue because your group is an exclusively political pro-life organization. Doug, your group there with Canada Family Action and the National Leadership Briefing focuses on 4 major pillars, which also looks at things like parental rights, fiscal stewardship, etc. But these are all important considerations. And so if you've missed part of this conversation tonight, I want to encourage you to go back to the beginning and watch it. We're going to have it on YouTube as well. So if you're one of those people that likes to watch it on fast time, you can do that on YouTube. And so we do have one really good question here that I'm spotting right now. There might be a few others that I've missed earlier up in the stream. But, Scott, where do people go if they want to check out your pro-life voters guide?
Sure. You can visit our website, www.itstartsrightnow.ca. And in the top taskbar, you will see conservative leadership. You just click on that, and then you will have our recommended ranked ballot. You'll have the voting records for all the candidates. I will tell you that it took me an entire 8 hours to get the voting record for Jean Charest. Jean Charest has been in politics for a very long time. He was first elected in 1984. And you can find the votes for every what's called recorded division. So every vote that occurred in the House of Commons and the Senate, you can find those quite easily by finding the vote number, because each vote has a number going back to the mid-90s. But Jean Charest was there before the mid-90s for a good 10 years. So I had to go to the Hansard, which is literally the big book of basically the recording of everything in the House of Commons, and I had to virtually flip through thousands and thousands and thousands of pages in the Hansard to go back to September, I believe, of 1988. No, pardon me. Yeah, September of 1988, and then going into 1989 into 1990 to finding his voting record on a number of motions that came up, pro-life and pro-abortion, and how he voted. So you can find the voting records there. You can find the interviews. Every candidate did an interview with us, which is fantastic, which is kind of weird because 5 of the 6 are pro-abortion. But hey, I'm not going to complain about them doing an interview with us, as well as an explanation as to why we ranked them the way we did.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I got to say, just if I may say this, Scott, that's one of the reasons why I tell everybody we serve, you got to be in relationship with Right Now, because you guys do the work so that a lot of other people can benefit from having that information served up to them on a plate. So thank you for the work that you did gathering those records. That is awesome.
I get paid a reasonable amount to do all that, so that people don't have to spend 8 hours going through the Hansard. So more than happy to do that. It's good to get the information out there.
Perfect.
And I love that you're a numbers guy too, Scott, because you always break it down so analytically from a mathematical perspective, which I really appreciate. We are also working on the For My Canada Voters Guide as well. Now, with For My Canada, we're not a one issue organization. So what we're going to be doing with that guide, and I do hope to have it out or up on the website by the end of the night tomorrow night, is we're going to be looking at the most common questions that we get asked. Today, 2022, people are very concerned about the federal vaccine mandates. They're very concerned about parental rights. They're very concerned about the federal debt. Another one of the things is about our relationship with Israel. This is something that a lot of candidates haven't really talked about, or our leaders haven't really talked about for a while, but this is something that I know our demographic really cares about. I'm also going to be rating people based on their campaign team or what we know of their campaign teams. I'm not omniscient, so I don't know everything, but there is a general vibe that we can kind of get from the various campaign teams, because I personally truly believe that who's around a candidate is probably just as important as the actual candidate themselves, because there does tend to become a group think, like within the staff tribe over time. And so we'll be looking at that as well. We'll also be giving people some thoughts regarding the ranked ballot situation and whether or not to fill your own ballot. I will throw this counterpoint out here. Doug and Scott might disagree with this, but I do know of some people that have said, okay, I'm only going to mark down the candidates that absolutely stand for the views and values that I care about, because I want to send a message to the party. So, for example, let's say if there's 675,000 people that are eligible to vote, we're told. Statistically, usually 2/3 of people actually show up to vote. So let's say somewhere around 450,000 people actually cast their vote or get their vote in on time for September the 6th. And let's say, for example, Leslyn Lewis as the only pro-life candidate, let's say she drops off the ballot. And when she drops off the ballot, 200,000 people just don't show up for the next round of voting. That 200,000 people disappear with Leslyn Lewis's name on the ballot. That in itself would send a very, very massive message to the party that there is a massive demographic within the party base that absolutely is not willing to compromise on some of these core value and conscience issues. So you have to decide. I'm not going to tell you how to vote either, but you have to decide whether or not you want to, vote in a way that sends a message to the party, or you want to vote in a way that blocks the lesser or bumps up the lesser of the evils and blocks the greater evil in your eyes in terms of where the candidates stand on the various issues. So there are different ways to look at this, and we're going to be crunching some of that out for you as well. But at the end of the day, we just encourage everybody to be governed by your conscience, because like Scott said earlier on in our chat together, you need to be able to lay your head down on your pillow at night after you mark that ballot and know that you have peace in your own conscience, that you conducted yourself in a way that would honor your conscience, would honor God if you're in relationship with God, and would be the best vote for future generations as you see it. So that's all important stuff. Okay, so guys, any last thoughts that you want to throw out there before we dive into a couple of the questions here? If you have time, I know we thought we were going to go for about an hour, but you guys have a few more minutes to spend with us live here?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So any final thoughts for our viewers here before we begin to wind down? Doug, why don't you go first?
Oh, just thanks so much again for the opportunity to join you today. Yeah, definitely. There's one thing I would like to share is that I would like everyone who's engaging in this process and participating along with us to know one thing as we approach election day, this election of this leader of this political party. I want you to keep in mind that is not the last day. The day of the election day, that is a day along the road in a plan that we are working strategically. And for those of you who track with us on the National Leadership Briefing, we tell you and we share the right up front, we have a plan and we're working strategically. Those are the things that we do. The leadership election within the Conservative Party of Canada is only one single mission within a plan that has other component parts. So whatever happens on election day, we're going to continue to work the plan to exercise what we call maximum influence within that political party. So please stick around and know that the day after, no matter whether you're celebrating or you're not so happy, we are continuing on, and we're doing things like electoral district association strategies to place people on local boards. We're selecting candidates. We're training campaign managers. We're doing all sorts of things to prepare to advance ourselves towards the next opportunity for us to speak with a combined voice and exercise our combined influence within that party. So please look forward to that the day after the election of this leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Doug. Yeah, and I have nothing really to add, but just to encourage, a good example of this is you look at the United States, right? Roe v. Wade just happened, and it was overturned with the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court of the United States. Well, that didn't happen just because Donald Trump appointed or nominated, I guess technically, 3 pro-life justices to the Supreme Court of the United States, which he did do, mind you. It happened because, almost 50 years ago, pro-lifers were getting out there. They were doing, church presentations. They were building databases. They were competing in the primaries for both the Republican and the Democrat parties to win those primaries, to get people into DC, to get people in the state legislatures, to get pro-life and for those who share our views and values as staffers into those state legislatures, staffers into DC. They were able to create lists and get people who share our views and values through law school, so that when they become lawyers, you have a pool of potential justices to appoint to the bench. This takes years. It took them 50 years in the United States to get to the point where Roe v. Wade was overturned. And mind you, just because Roe v. Wade is overturned doesn't mean that abortion is illegal in all 50 states. It means that abortion becomes quite restricted, like most of the rest of the world, in about 20 or 30 states, but they still have a lot of work to do in states like Massachusetts and New York and California. In Canada, the other week, we had Dr. Callum Miller, who does some excellent work from time to time with UK Right to Life. He was over here in Canada for about a week doing a few different talks, and I was able to meet with him. And he was asking me, Scott, like, how roughly the percentage of your federal Conservative caucus, how many would you say are pro-life? And I said to Callum, well, it's about 2/3 or 100% pro-life. And his jaw just dropped, because for the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, he said, 25% are 100% pro-life, another 25% are soft pro-life, another 25% are soft pro-abortion, and another 25% are hard pro-abortion. So he said, you guys are light years ahead of us. The point being is that you have to remember that political parties are not in and of themselves the end. Political parties are just a vehicle that we utilize in the political process to get to where we want to go. And so while we might not like who is driving, the Conservative bus at any point in time, the idea is that we want to hop on that bus and take over that wheel to steer that bus to where we want to go. Because if you look at other political parties, they're not even a bus. It's like a scooter, right? The bus is going to go much further. You're going to have more people on that bus. It's already built. We don't have to build a different bus. The idea is to ingrain oneself into basically a institution. And I think we can call political parties in this country institutions. I mean, they've been around for 150 years, into an institution that already exists, so that we can get it to where we need to go, so we can elect the people we need to elect, so we can actually pass the legislation we need to pass, appoint the justices we need to appoint the senators we need to appoint. And that is echoing Doug's point, is to remain within major political parties that actually have a history of electing people to the House of Commons.
Thank you so much, you guys, for that. And thank you so much to everybody who's been tuning in here, watching this. And if you logged on late, we encourage you to go back once we're done and watch the archive of this. So much incredible information that has been shared throughout our conversation here. I know I had a few real eye-opener moments, so I so appreciate everything that you guys are sharing tonight. And so does Lewis. Look at Lewis. This is Lewis from Quebec. Thank you for the overview. Very insightful to be aware about the views, voting habits, and supporting teams of the different candidates. Thank you, Lewis. We appreciate you being with us tonight, and so many kind comments tonight in the stream. But I do want to throw up one question here. This is from Brian. He says this. Thank you to all three of you. This has been very helpful. Do any of you have concerns about the party machinery rallying behind Leslyn if she wins? And then he goes on to say, it seems like the non-social conservative wing of the party, or we would say the red Tories, are quick to attack social conservatives. Interesting observation. Are quick to attack social conservatives. For example, how quickly Andrew Scheer was removed from within. And so before I open it up for you guys to answer that, I am going to put up, just in case some people need to start logging off, I am going to put up our websites here on the bottom. So it startsrightnow.ca. That's where you can find Scott's pro-life voters guide. Is that correct? Did I get the website right?
Yeah, you got it there. Yeah.
Okay, formycanada.ca, that is us. And nlbcanada.ca. Did I get that one right, Doug?
You did.
Awesome. That I was winging it there, so I'm grateful that I got it right. So those are the websites that you're going to want to jot down and refer to after we're done here today. But the party machinery, if Leslyn Lewis wins, what's your guys' read on that? Will they get behind her?
Do you want to go ahead first, Doug?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we actually did some of this training on the National Leadership Briefing, and we called it bully training. And it's important that you understand who the bullies are and what their goals and objectives are. And just in every facet of life, there are bullies. There are bullies that want to restrict you advancing your ideas, and they want to shut you up. And there are, within every facet of life, you're going to run into bullies. And the thing that happened last time, you could probably make a case that there were bullies and they bullied Andrew Scheer out of the party, or you could look at it from that perspective. But I want to look at answer the question moving forward, as it was so appropriately posed. Do you think she's going to have any trouble with the party machinery coming behind her if she is elected? Well, Dr. Leslyn Lewis win will make a very large statement. First of all, there's a very large number of mobilized Canadians that want to see what she has proposed advanced within the House of Commons and within Canadian political and governmental circles. She is asking for a mandate from the party members to move forward with an agenda. And if she wins, there might still be some bullies, but we're also, we have a lot more of us now this time within the party. And I'm trying to be soft because I don't want to become a bully myself. Like, I don't want people to I don't want the tyranny of the majority to be imposed upon anybody. But the reality is that we are getting better at what we're doing. We're more strategic. We're more disciplined in our approach, and there's more of us. And we're getting better because of people like you, Faytine and Scott, at articulating our issues and what we'd like to see done. And so it's getting kind of hard to bully us anymore. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to win every time, but we're certainly becoming better at what we do. And every time, like, for example, I'm looking forward to the next policy convention of the Conservative Party of Canada. And that's a very, very good place to look and see where are we at? How are we doing? Because you have all of these people that are mobilized in the process getting into a room, and everyone is given a voting card, and they can vote one hand up, hand down on all of the issues, or a machine that they're given. And you really quickly get to see how well you're doing. And I think we're doing pretty good. I think we're doing a very good job. And I'm talking about we collectively, the people, the engaged mobilizers that you put together, Faytine, Scott, your team's on the ground. We're just becoming more organized, and we're getting more efficient. I am looking forward to seeing anyone try to bully whoever is elected the leader, because I think that it's actually, I think it's going to be okay. Those old days are behind us.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point there, Doug. To get to Brian's question, with someone like Leslyn Lewis, and this is not to necessarily tear down, Andrew Scheer. I would, consider him to be a friend of mine, but I don't think Leslyn Lewis is in the business, knowing her, of tolerating any BS. If I could be so frank, she's a very strong woman. She's very principled. She's very, very. There's a finesse about her as well. I mean, this woman did run her own business. She litigates before justices and courts of law for a living. She's done that for a number of years. So, there's a lot of people skills that come with that. Frankly, that don't necessarily come with being a opposition member of parliament for 20 years for all of your adult life. I think that one of the main mistakes, and we talked about this earlier, that Andrew Scheer made, was that when he became leader of the opposition, he didn't clean house. He inherited a lot of the people that were in there from Rona Ambrose, a lot of people who's the interim leader at the time. Rona Ambrose inherited a lot of people that were left over from the Prime Minister's office, the PMO, from when Stephen Harper was leader of the party and Prime Minister of Canada. So you have a lot of people who do not share our views and values. You have some people that were in Andrew Scheer's OLO who are aggressively pro-abortion, who aggressively didn't like us. I would say you had most people in there were aggressively indifferent toward us, neither of which is a good situation. So I think if you have someone like Dr. Leslyn Lewis win the leadership race, you immediately need to make your mark known. You immediately need to clean house in the OLO. You need to put your own people in. You need to be able to have people who share your vision for the party, that are part of the Conservative Fund Canada. So this is the board of directors that operates the money for the Conservative Party of Canada. They're the ones who pay party staff. And the board of directors for the Conservative Fund Canada is nominated and selected by the leader themselves. Oftentimes, leaders just kind of ignore it. And it's important that a leader make their mark known. To Aaron O'Toole's credit, he did that when he first became leader. You might get a little people frustrated with that, but that's part of being leader, right? Is to make sure you have people in there that share your vision for the leadership of the party, for the leadership of the country. So I think by doing those things that, frankly, that Aaron O'Toole did do, that Leslyn Lewis could do with her own people is important. That being said, social conservatives and pro-lifers don't represent 100% of the party. We might represent a majority of the party. I would say we might represent a majority of the party voting universe and the party donor base, but it's not 100%. So it's important to have people with other views and values in there to give their perspectives. It would be nice to have someone in, should Leslyn Lewis win the leadership race, it'd be nice to have a few people in the higher echelons of her OLO that don't necessarily share views and values. But one of the things that they contribute is like, okay, you want to talk about abortion, you want to talk about assisted suicide in the upcoming election against Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland or whoever's the leader of the Liberal Party at the time. Tell me how you would present that. And they can offer some perspective on that. Like, if that isn't received quite this way, maybe we can reword it this way. They're not changing the principles, but it's good to have those people around to have a well-rounded communications around your core policies that you want to represent, that you were elected to represent on behalf of the party in the upcoming election campaign. So I think by doing that, by clearing house, and then by bringing in a few people who don't necessarily share views and values, where it is that understanding, you're coming in to the inner circle and you have to sign on that this is where we're going, but we want your perspective to be able to properly shape how we're going to represent these principles. I don't think Andrew Scheer did that. I don't think necessarily Aaron O'Toole shared our views and principles, so that didn't really matter. So I think if you kind of mix the two together with Dr. Leslyn Lewis, I think, Brian, that's how you would overcome those knives coming out earlier than they probably should, if at all.
Yeah, and Dr. Leslyn Lewis has a massive backbone. We saw that with the child vaccination tweet that she put out, where she puts out this tweet, immediately got fire from the OLO, ended up losing a shadow cabinet position over taking a principled stand, saying, hey, I'm going to be a voice for the people who elected me, not for the people who are telling me what to do. And so she has shown time and time again. And, not to mention as well that, or not to forget, that she's actually not a career politician. She's somebody who's actually taken a pay cut and a lifestyle cut to do this. And she's coming in because she's got a real principled fire in her heart. So that's a distinct difference as well. Wow, so much. I was sitting there listening to you, Scott, thinking, man, this guy should have a podcast. And then I was like, wait a second, this guy does have a podcast. You and Alyssa just started a podcast, didn't you? Why don't you tell people where they can go to get more of Scott Hayward?
Sure. So it's www.thestinkingalbatross.ca. That's the name of our podcast because Peter MacKay said that social conservatism was a stinking albatross around Andrew Scheer's neck, and that's why that he couldn't win the 2019 election campaign, despite him being the most winnable conservative leader in the last 3 election campaigns, including Stephen Harper and Aaron O'Toole. But putting that aside, that's where we got the name, because we said, well, let's embrace this. We are the Stinking Albatross. Fine, you want to call us that we will be that. So we have a podcast. It's released every Friday. And we've had a couple guests on it so far. Our good friend Jonathan Van Marion, Dr. Callum Miller. Sometimes it's just Alyssa and I ranting and raving about whatever is happening in the news that week. It's not just from a pro-life perspective, mind you, it's from a general social conservative perspective, but of course it's a lot from the pro-life perspective as well. And we like to keep it fairly Canadian. So if we talk about things from around the world, we like to Canadianize it, whether it be, Roe v. Wade being overturned or things that are happening in other countries. So anyways, that's where you can catch us. And if you enjoyed listening to my long-winded ranting answers in this live stream, you can find more of that every Friday at thestinkingalbatross.ca. So go there, like, subscribe, and we will direct that and feed it right into your veins every Friday.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you owning it and being a little feisty there. That makes it a lot more fun. So thanks so much for all you do there, Scott. And Doug, you also have something going on the first Friday of every month. For those that aren't aware, why don't you give that a little plug right now too?
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's at that web address that you see there, nlbcanada.ca. There is a link where people can register to join us every month on the first Friday of every month for 1 hour, where Canadians from across the country come together and rally around these principles, these 4 pillars, we call them, and join our voices together and look for those opportunities where we can exercise our influence in a combined way and advance these principles into society, culture, politics, and government. So join us. You're invited to come on the briefing. Now, if you can't make it on the first Friday of every month, just by you registering at nlbcanada.ca, you will receive a video copy of the briefing if you miss it, along with all of the resources that we share during that 1 hour conversation.
Amazing. 2 incredible resources. And of course, you guys know where to find me, Fatine TV. I don't know, we're on 8 networks now. I cannot remember all of the places that we air and all the times, but we're out there every single week speaking to the issues shaping the nation. And you can also get on our email list there at formycanada.ca. But if I could just share a final thought, and guys, if you've got another final thought on top of the final thoughts, feel free. But I want to say this. One of the things that concerns maybe / terrifies me the most about our current political discourse is the habitual acting without assertively reaching to keep our conscience intact. One of the reasons that Canadians are disillusioned with our leaders right now, particularly values-based voters, is because we've seen time and time again where leaders that we thought would take a stand on an issue, that we thought would do the right thing in a moment of pressure, actually capitulated to political pressure and to the pressure of the mainstream media. And we're looking for leaders now today. I believe that actually our future depends on electing leaders that have a backbone and that are willing to conduct themselves with their conscience intact. But I want to put a challenge out to us as voters, because how can we expect our leaders to conduct themselves with their conscience intact, with a backbone, with courage, if we aren't willing to do the same at the voters at the time of voting on our ballots? And if you are wrestling over who to vote for, and your wrestle is between the person that reflects your values and the person that you feel like is the better political package, I would say that we need to take an honest look in the mirror and say, are we dabbling with actually becoming the very thing that we ourselves have become disillusioned by in our leaders? If we don't appreciate it when our leaders compromise, then why in the world would we ourselves compromise in a moment, in a defining moment that could chart the future of our nation? And we saw in the last leadership race that just 57 voters, and I believe it was less than I'm having a memory blip moment right now, but it was just 57 voters and 149 ridings. There it is. It was 57 voters and 149 ridings that would have changed the outcome of the leadership race. And I remember in that leadership race in 2020, many people saying, we like this candidate, but we're going to vote for this candidate because we think that they have a better shot in the federal election. Well, how did that go for us, right? So, this really is a time to take a look in the mirror and say, listen, if we want leaders that are going to have a backbone and stand in accordance with their conscience, then we need to be voters that have a backbone and stand in accordance with our conscience. And that just may be the thing that starts to shift and clean house in all the right ways in our current political context. We need to be the change that we are hoping for in our leaders. So that is my final thought. Any other final thoughts, guys, before we let people go tuck in their babies? I actually think our tech guy is probably turning into a pumpkin behind the scenes here, because we are at Atlantic Standard Time, and I know him. He likes to go to bed early. So thanks for sticking with us, Adam. Any final thoughts before we let everybody go tonight?
I think that's a great final thought, Fatine, and I just keep it there. Yeah, that's great.
I agree.
Okay.
That was awesome.
Okay, well, for those of you that stayed all the way to 1 hour and 35 minutes, there you have it. That is the end, the rest of the story. So thank you so much, everyone, for logging on. And we will perhaps be back to banter some more if we've got more to talk about. But again, check out Scott's website. It starts right now for that voter's guide. If you are a pro-life voter, that is what you care most about. That's basically your one-stop shop for your voter's guide. If you have other issues that you care about as well, our voter's guide should be up by the end of tomorrow night, crunching everything out here. But thank you again so much for joining me tonight. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Faith.
everyone. Thanks for having us on.